Today, I'm interviewing the man who was at the foot of my men's work journey, Mr. Craig White. How are you doing, Craig?
Good, mate. Nice to see you.
It is good. I honestly, every time I have an interaction with this man, I leave with more certainty, clarity, and inspiration. I just want to give you guys listening in, and actually you ladies listening in as well, because we have quite a few ladies listening to our podcast, Craig. So I began my men's work journey after going on Craig's retreat, and I met Craig at a good friend of ours' wedding. So I studied under a guy called Dr. Phil Richards for probably like 4 or 5 years. He was a mentor of mine, a friend of mine. He was radical in health and fitness, and he spent an awful lot of time in rugby. And he always talked about this friend he called Whitey, and I don't know, and then Craig White, and he told me about Craig's work in rugby, and I followed Craig from afar, and we bumped into each other at his wedding, and Craig told me about the great things he was doing in men's work, having learned so much from rugby, and I think we should talk about that, Craig, because I found it really interesting, and then. I stumbled upon hard times in my relationship, and I was like, I didn't know where to turn. And I made Craig a promise that I would go on his retreat, and he served me powerfully, got me on the retreat, and there is a got me onto the retreat. I've told that story, and I'm so grateful for that, Craig. Um, and it was pivotal for me. It was a real rite of passage. I just turned 30, and it was almost like when the students ready, the teacher appeared, and it was really serendipitous. So, thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for being in my life, Craig. It's been an absolute pleasure to do any business or any sort of stuff that we've done together so far.
No, it's a pleasure, mate. It's nice to teach you, and it's nice to learn from you, as I always do.
Thank you, man. Let me just I want to go back to the first conversation that really pricked my ears up when we started talking. You spent an awful lot of time in World Rugby. Craig's accolades in World Rugby are really, really phenomenal. But there was something you said at the dinner that we were talking. You were saying that they don't rugby as a whole is a culture of men, but it doesn't look after the psychological wellness of men. And I just found that really, really interesting. Could you talk to that just to start with?
Um, yeah, I mean, how long ago was that, Ben? How many years ago was that? It was a while ago, right?
It's more. It's probably about 6 years, maybe more. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it seems to be changing. Um, I still think it's not changing fast enough, and a lot of organisations are just bringing in someone to talk about mental health and hoping things will change. And you and I know it's much deeper than that. For me, it's more important to go through the coaching staff and filter those mental skills down. And also, in order for the filtering to have a real influence on these young men and women playing the game today, it's important that the men in coaching positions do their work. You know, you and I are fascinated by this word men's work, and it equally applies to the leaders in professional sport, professional rugby. Um, these men have to do their work in order to be viable role models and model, authenticity really to these young men and women growing up. Because, like it or not, these young men and women, and when I say young, teenagers in the 20s, even early 30s, they are projecting onto the coaches, whether they trust them or not, that they're actually seeing potential father figures. And it's more important than ever before in history, really, because you and I know that we're living in an epidemic. Yeah, because you and I know that we're living in the epidemic of the absent father, and we'll go into that. We can go into that later when we talk about this king energy that we all have. And so there's a lot of young men and women, they actually go into sport, or they're projected into sport to look for father figures, to look for role models, to replace the void that might have been missing from their lives growing up, to be blessed and seen and heard and valued and guided for the God-given talents. So professional sport in general is an amazing platform for human transformation. And
Wow. Yeah, actually,
so
just when
I
just
think it
to
should start with organizations providing support for coaches and managers and practitioners to really do their own work.
just to jump in there, actually, that's just made so much sense. I actually made a reel last night about my experience when there was turmoil in my family. My stepfather passed away when I was 17, and I found my solace on the running track. And I had a really strong, steady, easy guy, a guy called Phil Oliver, and he was like a very much a father figure for me. He was a very good constant throughout that period, and I never even looked at it like that. Um, and like it was something that I realized that I was looking for. It was just like that. It was stability. I had very much an up and down childhood, but like going into like any sporting arena, and I also got that validation as well. I got praise, validation, which I didn't get as a youngster from my father. So yeah, it was big.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the probably one of the most important pieces of work that I do with my clients, Ben, is, you know, and we're both in this field of men's work. Clients come to me, especially the ones that come on retreat. We hear some horrific stories of a lack of fathering, if you will, and whilst it can take a lot of years to kind of unravel that and to receive blessing that they didn't have and grow into their own father figure as they grow older, one of the key pieces of work that I do is a life inventory where we look through a man's life from the day he was born to now. And instead of placing the full responsibility of fathering onto one man, I try to help them unpack little snippets of fathering. Well, you may have been fathered for a little while here. Your dad was around for a few years, and maybe your uncle stepped in, and then maybe your mother had to play the role, and then maybe you came across a great PE teacher, and then a maths teacher, and all of a sudden we look at the life, and it's like, whoa,
Oh
wow,
wow.
I'm still pissed off with my dad, but actually I have had an element of fathering, and I feel like I have been blessed in with snippets of masculine energy, fathering energy that culminate in the whole. So that's a big piece of work. It doesn't always work with guys that are severely traumatized, but it works with a lot of men.
Well, yeah, and I think this kind of segues in, especially in my experience, to what we're going to be talking about today about king. Being a king in your own life, and the I found that especially when you were the first person that introduced me to the archetypal king, and you gave me a really good description for that. Really, you were really really good at explaining that, and I realized in my own life, not wasn't blaming my dad, but I'd sought leaders. I'd sought out these men to put, and what instead of having them as guides, I'd put them in the position of leadership in my life, and I wasn't leading in my own life as powerfully as I could have done, and I was always the well, maybe it was the shadow king, the weakling king. I'd put another man on my internal throne, and then when he would tell me to do something, I would resent him, or when I'd make him out to be perfect, and when he made a mistake, I would judge him. And I realized that inner leadership and my inner king were or was the work for me, and is the work for me still. And I think you'll probably find a lot of men come to you for that. I think that you exude that when you coach and in your leadership, you're very much the king in in the places that you show up in rugby, in men's work. So tell me about your experience, like, because I know this is something that you're very very good at helping guys with.
So do you want to go? Shall we go? Do you want to talk about the king?
Go for it, man. Yeah, let's actually, just because it's like we might just start talking about this archetype, and people don't have a really really thorough understanding. So I think if you could bless us with a really good just understanding of what it is and why a guy might needs to pay attention to this, I think it'd be really
I mean,
helpful.
even that word, Ben King. You know, if me and you and other people listen to that word king, I mean, it can mean something very different to the different people that might be listening to this. You know, when you think about king, if we've kind of grown up without a king or without a father, and we've watched loads of Hollywood movies where the king is a dominator and I win, you lose, and power crazy and manipulative, you know, we may have a negative connotation of what that means if we've had if mum and dad were around and dad was a role model and we had lots of great influences in school and you know and we were blessed and we were seen. It's easier for those men and women to get the shit together, you and I know, and then we may close our eyes and think, oh wow, when you say king, I remember my father, I remember my granddad, I remember my uncle. So it all depends on our experience. But I would say I really would say, based on the work that I've done, Ben, that for the majority, this word king, it elicits memories and feelings of arrogance and grandiosity and disgust and domination and manipulation and this lust for power. We seem to have downloaded this. So, but it's still a valuable energy to use with men. And let me go into that a little bit. So, you know, this word king, or whether it's a king or a magician or a lover or a warrior, whatever it is, you know, it's a symbol. And as humans, we resonate with symbols. Symbols help us to make sense of this abstract world that we live in. Symbols help us to understand our thinking and our feelings and our behaviors. So they help us to bring a sense of meaning, and symbols have a real interesting effect on our nervous system and our brain. So the king is a symbol. The king is an aspect of our behavior. You know, the king can be an energy, a potential, a center. You know, we use all these different names within the work that we do, depending on who we're talking to. So I like to use the word potential, you know, a potential energy or potential center. And this potential in all of us related to the king is one of wanting to make sense of things, to have clarity and order, direction, and move into a purpose. There's a real drive within human beings to feel rooted in the world, but also have a connection to a purpose that is greater than this kind of body and this personality. So the king's very much about clarity, order, and purpose. So words like mission and legacy come into this domain. It's also about power, like it or not. And again, the word power, when we say the word power, some people might be negative, they might be repulsed by the word power because of what we download. But it is very much about power. And unfortunately, we can get stuck because, you know, the patriarchy taught us that power's on the outside and power's about us, and we need to create I win, you lose situations. And when we delve into the center of the king, which is the heart, and I'll come on to that in a minute, we realize that, oh, actually, I've been searching for so many years for external things and validation, and it never ends. But when I turn inwards and I connect with my heart, well, wow, what's this? What's this world here? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing in the world? Who do I do it with? What brings me joy? So then we start to cultivate what I would call real power, the power to decide who we are, the power to create an identity, the power to create our own set of rules, not the rules given to me by mum, dad, and the government, the power to get myself out of bed in the morning and self govern my life. So I know now that that is real power. You know, it isn't real power to look on the outside because it's a never ending search of logic and reason. And our mind will get us stuck if we lead only with our mind. It's only when we can connect to our heart that we can. I'll own this. It's only when I connected with my heart that I have found real value in the world and a real sense of meaning and cultivate more presence in life with who I am. Um, so it's also about joy as well. It's also about accessing that natural joy that really it's always there, but we don't always feel it because there's so many filters covering up and beliefs, limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough, which is a key wound within this kind of archetype. But just to summarize the start of it, we do have this drive within us to create order and purpose. And it's shaped through life, Ben. You know, we come into the world and we don't know why we're here. We can't really make sense of it, but it's a fascinating world. And our nervous system has this craving for role models, for masculine role models. Our nervous system has this craving to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, to be guided, which ultimately is what we call in our word blessing. We crave to be blessed. And this is exactly where the challenge lies now for young men and women growing up. And for us and for anybody in human existence really is if there aren't healthy role models, or if dad was absent for whatever reason, you know, maybe he died, or maybe he committed suicide, or maybe he was sick, or maybe mum kicked him out, maybe he couldn't have access to you, maybe he was around, but he didn't know how to emotionally be there for you, maybe he couldn't get shit together. You know, we are really living in an epidemic of absent fatherhood like never before. And if these things are happening, it's confusing for us growing up. We're also at the edge at our time in history. Me and you are at the edge of transition from the old patriarchal rule. You know, I win, you lose. Men have to dominate. Men have to come out on top. Men have to be know-it-alls. Men have to be the one controlling power. Men have to objectify and dominate women. We're at the end of that, and again, that's confusing. And the other, so it can be tricky, Ben, when we've not had that blessing. Um, the other the other challenges that I want to talk about in relation to the healthy development of the king within us is that our world leaders, and this has been proven now. I have a good friend of mine who's producing a documentary on boarding school trauma. It seems that a high percentage of our world leaders are traumatized boarding school boys. And because they're in such prestigious power, they're afraid to do the work. They're afraid to be vulnerable. They're afraid to be courageous. They're afraid to speak the pain because we've grown up as a society that projects such greatness onto our leaders. If our leader says, I'm depressed, then we don't trust him. So it's a paradox. We want these guys to do their work, but then we don't create the space for them to do the work. So,
Just their behavior, you know, you look at
so,
a lot of their behavior. Yeah, and yeah.
that's troubling. You know, our leaders are traumatized, our fathers were traumatized, and just still while we're on the subject of challenge, we're also still in our heads. You know, we've been, me and you again, we're at the end of an ancestral chain that's lived in our heads. In the 16th century, Descartes said to the big governments at the time, you know, we rule with our heads. Our head is the wise man. I think, therefore I am. So we took on board that as a man, you have to lead with logic. The feelings and the home of the heart is the domain of women. So men rule with the head. We're now in the middle of a technological revolution, which puts us even more into our head. So um, it's a confusing world for young men and women growing up. There's an endless search for meaning, but if we're searching constantly with our logic and not our heart, it never stops. We want more and we want more and we want more. And it's only when we connect with our hearts that things start to make sense, or it did for me. And that's
Yeah.
something that we can go into if you want.
Yeah, I think we should because, like my experience was, I think that was what was so profound about Men Without Masks. You know, so Craig's retreat is called Men Without Masks, isn't it? And he's got the Men Without Masks retreat, and he's got the King retreat. And Craig, if you could share that about at the end, that'd be great. Um, the the experience of the king, and like I was like, oh shit, I never even knew that I was showing up like this. Like I was a leader, you know, I am a leader. I lead tribes. I've always created community. If you look at the role of a king creates community. But what I wasn't doing is I was creating community, but I wasn't working on myself.
Yeah.
And I would solve my problems by solving other people's problems. Where I actually had to, it got to like 30, and I was like, right, okay, I have to turn in for a little bit now and work on myself. And the constructs that you gave me just really, really good footing into doing that work. And for me, it was little things like I remember just really like going into a big kind of research hole on the king, and I remember reading it. It says a king makes peace with his parents. He's the mender of the relationships, and I was like, holy fuck! I I fall out with people,
Yeah.
and then I'm hurting, so I won't make friends with them again. And I was just telling you before we started the podcast about, just some news about someone who's not coming to my wedding. And I was like, oh, I'm hurt by that. And I realized that there was also things with my father. Like, my dad has always been a great dad, but because I had my story from my mother, who she wasn't horrendous about how she spoke about my dad, but she could say 100 nice things about my dad, and the one thing would stick because that's how our brains are wired. And what
Totally.
I hadn't made peace with my parents. I hadn't made peace with the understanding of my relationship with their relationship. And in psychotherapy, I got a psychotherapist, and that was the work that really, really changed my life. And that doing that work, and that kind of, it took a while from when I did that work with you all the way to probably about 2 years ago, where that piece fell into place. But that was so transformational for me as a man and as a leader. So, what about you, Craig? You mentioned the king, and you're because I always assume when someone's got an implicit understanding of something, they've obviously done a lot of work and it's had a lot of value in their own life. So tell us about the king in your life.
Well, not too dissimilar from you in terms of the story you just told. I had a father that was around. My dad was an only child, also. Quite a private man in the sense of kept himself to himself, didn't like to go out, didn't like to go to parties, didn't like to go to gatherings. And he was there for me. He provided. He wasn't able to be emotional with me. He didn't. I don't remember feeling a lot of love from him growing up or guidance, but he gave me money, and I think that's what his parents did with him. He pulled me out of the shit. He gave me money. That was his way of showing support for me. Um, um, and as you just said as well, I I didn't know this until I was in my adult life, but I grew up thinking that my dad was weak. But the reason I grew up thinking that my dad was weak is because obviously I'm devoted to my mother as a boy until I separate from her. But as a boy, everything my mum says I believe, and I'm watching my mum on TV. I'm watching my mother watch TV because we spent a lot of time in the living room, and my mother's projecting greatness onto the stereotypical macho type, the athlete, the gladiator, the tough guy. And as a young man, young boy, I'm like cheering with her as well. Well, that's who maybe I should be that man. And then my mum's on my right, my dad's on my left, and I'm thinking, I mean, I don't remember thinking, but I must have been. Hang on a minute, my dad's not like that. My dad's like a gentle soul, keeps himself to himself, doesn't say much. Every now and again, he has a playful side that comes out. So it's like, what's going on there? So I downloaded that my father was weak. The other reason I downloaded that my father was weak is because I had a brother who's 12 years older than me, and call it bullying, I'd call it whatever you want, but he didn't make life easy for me. It was a tough time, and I'm thinking, why the fuck is my dad not standing up for me? And I know he had his own stuff going on with his dad, so I actually grew up thinking my dad was a weak and he wasn't the man. So again, I was looking outside like you did. I remember I had an uncle, Uncle Malk, who was a bit more kind of tough, accountable. I remember a teacher in school. I remember all my PE teachers were very significant in my life, very significant,
Yeah, me
incredible
too.
men. Uh, but when I look back, I thought, wow, my dad wasn't weak. He was just living life according to how he knew how to live, keeping himself to himself, worked the same job for 40 years, provided, made sure I was safe, lived through me because I was a decent rugby player and he came to every single game. He polished my boots the night before. He was living his own expression through
Mm.
me. Um, and when I first started on, I guess, the journey of self discovery, therapy, coaching, whatever you want, um, I mean, when did that even start? Let's say about 15 years ago. I was still kind of projecting weakness on my father until I realised that, hang on a minute, no, he wasn't weak. And I've had so many snippets of mentoring in my life. I'm so grateful. And then I also realised I was incredibly grateful to my father because my father lived a life that for some reason, Ben, even as a young kid, I rebelled against. I didn't want to be in the same job for 40 years. I didn't want to be in a job that I hated just to provide. I didn't want to suppress my anger with 30 fags a day. I didn't want to be passive aggressive, even though I was for a number of years. So I looked back and I thought, fucking hell, Dad, thank you.
Mm.
Thank you
Yeah,
for showing me a
that's
model of kingship that I didn't want to follow. Now that's a reverse way to look at things, but and then thank you to my mum for making me think that my dad was weak because I didn't want to live that way. And so that was good to unpack all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it was really good to hear that, and for guys listening in, like the significance that has when you let go of that shit that you attach to the bullshit stories, it's you feel lighter. Like honestly, you know, like feel a bit teary listening to that because it just can see so much of that in my relationship with my dad, and it was almost
Yeah.
like there was this invisible blockade between the two of us that shouldn't have been there, and it was just
Mm.
all a load of lies and childhood stories. And as I've let go of that, there's just been a real sense of a good relationship, and something that I've noticed for not just me but the guys I've worked with. You can do this with your dad even if he's passed. So Craig's talking. I don't know if your dad's here now, Craig, or if he's passed, but
Yeah, my dad's dead now. Yeah.
yeah, so you can do this work about your father if he's here now, and if he's here now, great, go and do it, guys. Honestly, the I'm so glad I turned towards my dad and not
Yeah.
away from him based on the bullshit stories that I created based on their relationship. But if you get like, and this is such a big part of inner leadership for men, and
Yeah.
I cannot say how important this is. And it's almost like the foothold you need to go deep, to go high. That's how I see it. If you've got the relationship with your dad right, it gives you strength to really, really springboard into the areas of leadership that you want to.
And Ben, it's probably the reconnection with father is, and the stories I hear around that after guys have worked with us on our retreats or with me in one to one, the stories of reconciliation, it brings a tear to my heart. It's just fucking incredible to see what can be
Mm.
done. And for some guys, there's a reconnection with father and they spend time together. For other guys, it's not like that. They say their piece, they make peace, and they might only see him once a year. I got a message the other day from a guy saying, I've just been over to the UK, to Bristol, and I really needed to step into this tough conversation with my father. He's not wanting to talk. I'm going to be the father. And they've been at his uncle's funeral. And before the funeral, he's had a conversation about his dad saying, look, Dad, I need you now more than ever in my life. I just need you to be on the end of the phone emotionally for me. And his dad's admitted that he wasn't always there emotionally for him. They've been at the funeral, they've been sat next to one another. And at the end of the funeral, a song's played. And the song was written by the son. So the son and his father are sat down. It's the son's song that's playing. And his dad grabs his hand and he squeezes it and never lets go of him for about 2 minutes.
Oof.
And
It
the
fits
son,
like that.
who's a friend of mine, the son said, that's all I need. He said, I'm free. He said, even if my dad passed tomorrow, I'm free.
Wow.
So the reconciliation in whatever form it comes in with the father is incredible.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it brought a tear to my eye that because it's interesting, and I know I haven't done um, the work I'm doing now, in Awaken Man is like, we've got a closed doors container of guys. So it's a mastermind, call it a container, call it a group, whatever you want to call it. We shut the doors and guys open up about the stuff that's going on. And I never realized, like, until you get the doors closed and a group of men and they start talking about their experience with their dads and how much pain there is there, how much struggle, how much hurt, how much potential there is. And just really, really, really inspiring, like, just to see men mending the relationships with the parents.
And
And like,
they have to become the king, right?
yeah, and that's what, yeah, exactly. I think that was, I think that's like, the work I've done with the Phil Stutz group, the tools, and about, having your own king and having your own inner father figure, fathering yourself. That has been the mission for me personally. But just to seeing that, the value it has on guys and how they lead is astronomical. And
Yeah.
when I first started men's work, I'm like, how the hell is this going to end up actually having an impact on business? Because when I first launched Awaken Man, I just said to guys, I was like, hey, listen, you're going to be more successful. I don't know how, but you just have to push the big old trust button. Come and join us and see what happens, and I guarantee you will become more successful. And it was crazy. Like, all the guys were leading in their own lives, taking bigger shots. They were mending, but they weren't doing the funnels and the lead systems and the marketing. They were just leading in their own lives better, and they did it from the basis of doing that work and working on their king. So yeah, I think it's really, really profound. And so like, actually, Craig, I've got an idea. Okay, you've got a guy, right? You got a guy. He comes to you, and you can see that his king, his king or his inner leader, whatever you want to call it, is not he's not at the top of his game. How would you help that man? Like, give me a walkthrough, blow by blow, of how you would, like, what would you get him doing, and what would the likely impact of that be?
Um, yeah, let me go general to specific. So, generally speaking, and I guess it's one of the reasons why they come to me initially, even though unconsciously they may not be aware of that. We've got to create a level of safety, Ben, you know what I mean? For him to be able to express his truth and take off his mask and remove his strategic behaviors and take off his armory that guards his heart, that has been wounded growing up as a kid. We've got to create a level of safety. At the same time, safety is a paradox, because to evolve with a coach, or to evolve in life anyway, being vulnerable is not fucking safe. Speaking your truth, taking off your mask, you're not going to feel safe. So it's on one hand, they need to feel safe to do that, but on the other hand, it isn't safe anyway. So I've got to create a container where, slowly but surely, he feels safe enough with me to speak his truth, whether that's through words, or the way he looks at me, or through his tears, or through his anger, or through the way he moves. He's really got to slowly start to express his truth. The truth that he's been afraid to share, the truth that he thought would fear rejection, the truth that maybe he thought the world would run away from. We've got to start with that. And there's relief behind that truth always, especially when they feel safe with a coach, and they go back to a nourishing relationship, for example. So speaking and expressing one's truth is really fucking important. And like it or not, a man's got to feel his pain. We can't sidestep that, Ben. We just can't. We can sugarcoat it. We can make it sound nice on social media, but a guy's got to go through some kind of pain, and the challenge of that pain. And the pain comes after speaking the truth. But again, on the other side of that is relief, especially if tears come. If tears come, there's relief. If anger comes and is confident to express that, at the end of anger, there's empowerment. So a guy's got to go through some kind of discomfort and cross the bridge of fear into new potential. Otherwise, he's always stuck in the past. The past is here. He's stuck in survival. The only way to set him free is go over the bridge of fear and into a world of new beginnings, a world of newness, potential, forgiveness, new ways of seeing things. So again, coming back to your original question, feeling safe, expressing the truth, feeling some pain, and then relating deeply to what's there then in that moment, relating to everything. One of the things that I always do with a client, Ben, especially in my one-on-ones on day one, is and you may do it in your own kind of way, is a life inventory where we look at his life in 7-year blocks, and within each 7-year blocks, we look at in one column the upsides, support, gain, pleasure, joy, and in the other column we look at the opposite, the downside, the lack of support, the loss, the pain, the hurt. And it takes a while to get through, and I'm challenging him with lots of different questions to make sure that in each 7-year block he's polarized his perceptions, right? It's like there's because a lot of men that struggle, they're victims of the past, and when we can polarize each block, it's like wow, as I look at this now and feel into my body, because my body's reacting to that, I actually feel quite balanced. It wasn't as bad as what I thought, and that period wasn't as good as what I thought. So it's really polarizing within the body, that, and then we look at themes and patterns and look at ways that it's been shaped. And then we look at each chapter and imagine it's a book. So it's like, what are the chapters called? It's like he's reclaiming his book of life. And then the final piece of that is a gratitude piece where I get him to go through it carefully and identify the people and the events that happened that he's most grateful for in relation to how he's being shaped now. And that's a really beautiful piece of work that takes almost a day to get through. And that's why I like to work with clients over 2 or 3 days. So that's one of the first pieces. And
can we just slow down a second there, Craig? Because I mean, I just don't want to skirt past that gold. It's just I think there's sometimes like we get on these and they're like,
I can get excited, and you're the man to stop me.
Yeah. No, it's good, man. I just because I think that this is the stuff that guys don't do. Like, this is a lot of guys listening to this would be like, oh, that's a great idea, but it's all like, I think I've done what you've talked about, but I did it in my own way. It took me 6 years. And I think that it's still incomplete. So I think what you've got there is a really beautiful system that a guy could work through and get quite a lot out of. That's very transformational, and I think that's the value of coaching. That I always say to people I teach about coaching, when someone's buying coaching, they're buying speed, ease, and certainty. Yeah. So I think you've got those two, speed and ease. You're going to get all of that in pretty much 2 days, and it's going to be way, way more straightforward than trying to do it yourself. And I think that's what that construct did. I'm going to steal that exercise somehow. But I think that so say a guy's struggling with his king, like when a guy's done that work, what are the normal changes that you see in clients and men? Like, I know you've coached leadership, you coached in professional sport. What have you seen as a fallout of that?
Before we get onto that, can I go a bit deeper into the heart?
You absolutely can.
Because you and I, we heard this: open your heart, connect with your heart, and it doesn't help men. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? What do you mean? So, but I have a felt sense of what that means, and it's life changing. And the most important aspect of king work, Ben, is blessing. It's like you and I have been on a retreat, and when a guy is holding you without judging you, even when he's just stood in front of you, and his energy is saying, I got you, bro, you're fine here, I see you, and we're looking at each other, I hear you, I value you are fucking good enough, I've got your back. Even the energetics of that is like, fucking hell. The nervous system is like the nervous system is drinking king energy. It's like, oh man, where were you when I was a teenager? Because
Yeah.
your nervous system doesn't know if it's 1971 or if it's 2024. That's the good thing. So by constantly receiving blessing, ditching your fucking mates that don't care about you, getting new mates that care about you, spending time with them, feeling blessed from new books, feeling blessed by watching more empowering programs on Netflix, feeling blessed by meeting a woman that fucking really wants to bless you. It's such incredible king work. So blessing is the number one aspect of king work. Now, in relation to opening the heart or reconnecting, there's a few ways that I look at that. If you and I know, if you're blessed by someone that cares about you, whether that's them just holding space or whether they're looking into your eyes, but you just feel them, even that opens your heart. You and I have looked into the eyes of other men, and for some reason, you start crying. It's like, what the fuck? What's just happened? No, your heart
Mm.
opens. Also, when you start to express your truth around these people that see you, your heart opens. When you lean into the fear and you open up, your heart opens. But thirdly, and this is something that guys unfortunately have to do to feel it, when you shift your attention, because we've lived in the head for so many years, eons, thousands of years, when you practice over and over and over again, shifting the attention into the heart, into the heart, into the heart, into the heart, you can activate the heart again, and you have a felt sense of what that is like. That's happened to me lots of times, and it's a game changer. I remember the first time it happened to me, Ben. I was on a 10-day silent meditation retreat in Thailand, I don't know, 14 years ago, and we were doing this practice, this Tibetan Buddhist practice called Tonglen. You can do it with a person in front, or you can imagine there's a person in front. And Tonglen is all about compassion. It's training us to feel the energy of someone else. So I did this practice. I imagined my mother was in front, and the directions were inhale your mum's suffering. And again, I'm thinking, oh, fucking hell, my mum, she lost her dad when she was 16. She lost a brother when she was 30. A sister died. My dad's died. Oh, it's kind of a lot of loss. And I'm inhaling my mum's suffering and then exhaling healing and freedom. Inhaling my mum's suffering. Imagine she's in front of me. And all of a sudden, something
Mm.
activated inside. And I'd tell you no word of a lie. It was like someone ripped open my heart and exposed my chest. And I was so fucking vulnerable. I was vibrating and I thought I could disappear. And the tears came. So, what I'm trying to say here is a lot of what we do, even in my one-to-ones, is physical practices. Physical practices that are designed to get us out of our head and into our body and into our heart, from simple meditation to breath work to opening the heart. It's like physically we're reactivating the heart's potential. And when we finally have a felt sense of the heart's capacities, it's like, fuck me. How could I have covered you up for so many years? How could I have hidden you? And then
Mm.
when we combine the head and the heart, it's a game changer. And this is not hocus pocus. You and I know there's research being done to prove the intelligence of the heart. The cells now that the scientists are finding in the heart that are related to intuition. So once we stop dominating the world with our thinking and we learn to trust the heart, and then we combine the two centers, that in itself is a game changer. But it requires practice. And just to finish what I'm talking about, what separates my work from the work of a therapist is practice. You can come to me for 3 days, you can come on retreat with me for 5 days, but when you leave here, you have to take away with your practice, and you need to create a system of support and accountability around you to continue that practice, because the nervous system is just downloading information. So we have to practice carefully what information we put into the nervous system. But that is my definition of opening the heart, but more importantly, how to do that.
Mm. As you were sharing that, actually, I love that expression of heart-centered leadership. I think I've always been very, very heart-centered with the way I lead teams, the way I lead my communities, very open. And you said about being vulnerable. And I agree. Men don't resonate with that word. You say be vulnerable to a man; it doesn't serve him, doesn't help him. It actually,
Courage is a better word for me.
say again.
Courage is a better word that I
Yeah,
use.
I use courageous as well, because it's actually an act of courage to be open and to be honest and to speak your truth about. And actually, this is what I found when I started to get into this work, because like what I did in fitness was get over it, give all the complication, and make fitness simple for people. And it kind of what I'm doing in men's work as well. And this work is like getting into it and making it simple and digestible and actually appealing to men.
Yeah,
For a lot of guys, when they're hearing you talk about opening your heart and all, it's so repellent. They're so far from that. And
of
I
course.
think that was me. I think that was me to a certain degree. Like I remember going on on your retreat, and I was like, "Fucking hell, you want me to do that?" And I won't say what it was, like various things, like, but it was fucking courageous. I had to like go. Do you know what? I trust you. I trusted Craig. I think I even said that in my testimonial video. I was like, "Fuck this! I trust this guy. He's led." He's led the highest levels of rugby teams. He's led men across things. I'm just going to push the big old believe button and do the work. And I did it. And it was interesting because even when you talk about like fall on the floor crying, or just like letting out the emotions, or I was still guarded. I was really hadn't I realized I hadn't cried as an adult
Yeah,
for since I was like maybe when my stepdad passed.
yeah,
And yeah, I didn't really cry on the retreat. I remember got emotional, but I didn't really let it go, and it took a while to get to that point. But I think that for me personally, as a leader, I'm so much more grounded. I'm so less reactive, and I'm actually way more in touch with being okay saying, yeah, I'm pissed off about that. I'm angry about that. I'm a bit of a wuzzy wug. What you see is what you get. We got the call before, and you're like, you're right, mate. And I was like, no, I'm not all right. I'm just I'm feeling heavy. But I think what that does for people around you is, as a leader of your family, leader of your team, leader of your organization, it gives them so much more prediction response. Like, oh yeah, Craig is showing up like this today because he says he is, and I feel safe. They don't walk into your office and get a passive aggressive comment, or for me, it would be like an angry stare or a
yeah,
clenched jaw.
yeah.
And I think you can just be honest about how you feel, and I think that's much better and much more powerful leadership.
It's important here, Ben. What's coming through my now is for your viewers to define what I call two sides of courage. Because sometimes when we talk about men's work, we think it's all dark and pain and admitting our weaknesses. And that's just one side of polarity. Like the other side, you see, through fear and childhood conditioning, and in some cases, childhood trauma, we end up living a life that's just kind of, it's kind of just here. You know, we're not fully expressing ourselves. We're not fully telling the truth. We're not fully living the truth. We're just kind of here with masks and armory and strategic behaviors to get what we want and free of what people think. So it requires courage, as we've said, to really step into our true potential. But there's two sides to that. One side of it is feeling safe enough to say, do you know what? I am fucking good enough. I don't believe that shit. I have got these talents. This is what I do better than everybody else. This is what comes naturally to me. I am going to fucking enjoy world. I have a right to feel joy. I'm going to play like a kid now and bring out my inner child. And I'm going to commit to the future. And I'm going to say in front of you guys, I'm going to make $1 million in the next year, or I'm going to have 2 kids. I'm going to step into fatherhood. That's one side of courage. The other side is I've been living a lie. I tell my wife lies. I'm not present with my kids. I feel shame. I look confident, but it's a mask. I'm fucking I feel pathetic most of the time. I'm angry as fuck. I'm angry with my brother. So it's not only this side, Bennett. There are two sides to it. That's
Yeah,
important for
I
men
love
to
how you
realize,
I
you
love how
know.
you put that. I really, really like how you put that
And
because I think, yeah,
it's hard. It's just as hard for men. The men I see, especially on retreat, it's just as hard for them to own that part as it is for them to own that part.
yeah, yeah, and I think that that's really it's really shone a light on something that I don't think I've been promoting as well. You know, I think I've been fixated a little bit. For those of you listening to the podcast, and like sometimes I talk a lot about the dark because I think I actually don't find it too difficult to self promote. Like shameless self promotion was something that I heard about last night. Like I'm okay at that. I could probably go about 10% extra into there. But I've been working on the dark side, that you know, the latter side you talked about. And but the thing is, though, having come to that point, I'll be better at that point. So you know, it's really interesting. But yeah, it's really great how you articulated that, and really, really grateful for that. Craig, tell us about the King Retreat because I know that it's something that is being something you planned for a long time. I know you've ran one. Tell the guys listening in about what you do there because I think it's, you know, definitely worth
Yeah.
sharing.
So Ben, I believe that life is short, and I believe that transformation can happen in a short space of time. I really, really do. I believe that men don't have time to waste. They don't have time to sit in therapy for years. So a big aspect of what I do is creating really significant experiences that can have such a jolt on our nervous system that the end point of these journeys is real lasting transformation.
Mm.
And one of my favorite places in the world is the Sacred Valley of the Incas just outside Cusco in Peru. I'm resonant with that place. I always want to live there. I might end up living there. It's the Valley of the Kings. It's the Valley of the Incan Empire. Cusco was the Incan Empire, and then the 60-meter Sacred Valley of the Incas leads to Machu Picchu. So when I kind of first went there, I just thought, oh, sorry, a few times after I went there, I just thought, wow, I'm going to do a retreat here, and I could see it and I could picture it as if it already happened, and it's such an inspirational place, Ben. A key word of kingship is inspiration. It's
Mm.
such an inspirational place to bring a group of men. And even if we didn't do any practices, Ben, even if we just hung out and did nothing, we would still leave more inspired, with greater clarity, greater connection to spirit or whatever we want to call it, greater connection with each other, more confidence to step back into our world as kings. It's like, wow, what an incredible place to bring men to really, really do our work over 10 days and transform into better leaders, transform through transition, transform into better fathers, better husbands, better leaders in business, go deeper into self-leadership and self-awareness. So I created a 10-day retreat, and it's called the King. The retreats that we do in the UK, the 5-day retreats, are centered around these four centers that you and I work with, the King, Warrior, Lover, Magician, or you could say, leadership, feelings, action, transformation. But the the King retreat is very much centered around this King that me and you are talking about today. Putting us helicoptering ourselves out of our usual distracting lives into an unbelievable energetic space to really dig into our own kings and assess how we've shown up as kings and assess how we've been influenced as kings and learn from each other as kings. So it's split into two parts. The first part is a 5-day retreat where we're doing all these physical practices that you and I have been talking about. We're talking to each other. We're sharing our mission. We're sharing what legacy we want to leave. We're supporting each other. We're holding each other accountable. And then the second part is a 3.5-day trek to Machu Picchu, which is the most inspirational pilgrimage I've ever done. And then we have a celebration in Cusco, and then we give each other feedback on what we see in each other before we go home. And it's my pride and joy, Ben. If I could do that 4 times a year and just live off that, I would do that. And it's incredibly transformational.
I think that should be your impossible goal, Craig, to
Yeah,
get them
yeah,
4 times a year. I love your work, and I'm a big advocate for what you do in Menvalt Mass and the King Retreat in your coaching. So it's been a pleasure to have you come and have a conversation today, Craig, and long may this alliance continue. I just really love how you the depth of which you can understand something in this, and also how pragmatic you are with it as well. I think that there's that is that rare pragmatism and intelligence. I think that's something that you don't get, because I think my experience of doing this work is it's a lot of it is shrouded in these words and these kind of that aren't easy to access for a lot of guys. And I think
yeah,
our work as coaches, especially coming from the sports world, where we're working with guys that who just like it nice and simple to digest. I
yeah,
think that's what the likes of me and you coming into men's work is, that we've got this ability to really make it digestible for a man who he just wants to put it into his life really, really simply. So, Craig, where's the best place people can find you and access your work? What's the best place they can go to?
yeah. You could find Men Without Masks and Craig White Mentoring on Instagram. You can find Craig White on LinkedIn. You can check out those websites, menwithoutmasks.com, craigwhitementoring.com.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you so much for coming on the Wake 'Em On podcast. I'm definitely going to have you back on. It'll be an absolute pleasure to do another episode. And thank you for being here, man.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you, brother.